What's up, everybody? We're back.
Yeah!
Hey! Welcome back to a Metalhead's Journey. I would say sorry I had to miss a week, but you guys probably haven't seen that video or probably won't see that video that I missed for like another 6 weeks. But hey, just to carbon date this one for you, happy Memorial Day, everybody. It's Memorial Day in 2025, just in case this doesn't get released until next year. Hey, we're back around to the top 20 rock albums of all time right now. It feels like it's been forever since we've been here. And the rock list has treated us very well. We've gone through some unbelievable classic albums. Queen... well, go ahead.
That ends today.
Rush.
Well, hold on, dude. Rush, Moving Pictures, Queen, Night at the Opera. Back in Black. The Brown Bomber from Led Zeppelin. We've been so fortunate that I think this has probably been one of the more highly scored lists that we've ever done.
I believe you are correct.
Until today.
Yeah.
We have arrived at the number 11 album of all time. How this album is supposedly better than albums I've already named, I don't know. I can't fathom it. This is The Clash with London Calling. I will hit a quick history of the band and the album, and we'll move right into this thing. The Clash, formed in London in 1976, were a pioneering punk rock band that blended raw energy with political conviction, becoming one of the most influential acts of their era. Founded by Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Simonon. Like, imagine your name is Paul Simonon, and there's a Paul Simon. And initially Keith Levine with Terry Chimes on drums, later replaced by Topper Headon. They emerged from the UK punk scene with a sound that fused punk's aggression with reggae, ska, and rockabilly influences. There you go, Dave. Their self-titled debut album, 1977, captured their rebellious spirit, while London Calling from 1979, a genre-defying double album, cemented their legacy with its hits like the title track and Train in Vain. Known for lyrics tackling social injustice, war, and inequality, they gained a global following, but faced internal tensions leading to lineup changes in their breakup in 1986. I feel like that should be a holiday. The Clash's fearless innovation and commitment to their ideals made them enduring icons of punk and rock music. London Calling, released in December of 1979 by The Clash, is a landmark double album that transcended punk's raw roots, blending reggae, ska, rockabilly, and pop into a politically charged masterpiece, that solidified the band's legacy. Recorded in London with producer Guy Stevens, the album featured Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Simonon, and Topper Headon at their creative peak, delivering iconic tracks like the title song London Calling, a gritty anthem addressing societal decay, and Train in Vain, an unexpected hit with a pop rock edge. Its 19 songs, including Clamp Down and The Guns of Brixton, tackled themes of rebellion, unemployment, and global unrest, reflecting the band's sharp social commentary. With its eclectic sound and bold cover art, a nod to Elvis Presley's debut album, London Calling achieved a critical and commercial success, reaching the UK top 10 and the US top 30, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest albums in rock history.
Jonah, you should go first, because you're probably going to glaze this record a little bit more than we will.
Yeah, and that's saying something, because I'm not really going to glaze it at all. I definitely, based on our offline interactions, have probably the most positive take on this album. However, I do definitely have some criticisms. I didn't really click with the album as a whole. There are some moments at some specific tracks that we can get into that I did genuinely like, and there are some aspects of this that I think are genuinely good to great. One of them being, I'll spoil something for the future if we're still going to do that. I think the bass sounds amazing on this album. It's that classic, iconic Fender P bass sound. And for me, at least, in a lot of these songs, the bass kind of carries it because, while the guitar is generally doing something kind of basic, if you will, the bass is just going off. He's doing the runs up and down, and the rhythm and the melodies that the bass is doing, I really, really liked. And I think that sound is very defining of the era, definitely. So just some overall thoughts. You touched on some of the different genres that I guess this album tackles, and one of my criticisms is that it's trying to do too much at once, kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of situation.
Maybe.
The reggae parts in particular, I didn't really gel with. Like Guns of Brixton was really goofy to me with like some of the sound effects and stuff. But conversely, I feel like you can't overlook the kind of pop culture influence that this album and band probably had for the time. But I feel like maybe that has kind of overshadowed the quality of the music itself. And I think some of you might agree with that notion. Like I said, the bass levels are great, and some of the highlights for me were the British new wave elements. Like songs like Lost in the Supermarket, for example, I think was a standout track for me. But otherwise, I wasn't really vibing with what I was hearing very much. Now, I'm playing a little bit of the meta game here because I'm going to preemptively label myself as a hypocrite here because I think some of the influence and like artistic style that this album does, while I didn't necessarily like it, I think there's a good chance that some might apply some of those same criticisms and labels to a future band that we have on this list, from England. And I'm not going to name any names, but I really like that band.
Does it rhyme with the Beatles?
And it rhymes with the Beatles. So again, I realize the hypocrisy of me, criticizing this album so heavily, but I'm gonna be defending the Beatles. I'm just gonna say it now. I'm gonna be defending the hell out of the Beatles when we get to the Beatles. And some of those criticisms I think are valid for both this and the Beatles. But overall, like I said, there were some standout moments, but in general, if we're looking at the album as a whole, especially being that it's 19 tracks, it's a double album, it's kind of a slog to get through, and I'm sure everyone else is gonna touch on that as well. It didn't quite click with me. Spoiler for later, we're not gonna do a certain section we normally do, but I think if I were to take all my favorite tracks, even if not all of them I think are great, if I was to take all my favorite tracks from this album and make it an 8-track album, I think that is going to be a much better album overall, and one that I think would get a much higher score.
Yeah, I mean that's just addition through subtraction. I think.
Yeah, sure.
I'll go next.
But it's something we do, so I just figured I'd bring it up.
Yeah, hold on, Dave. Let's pause right here to let anybody who doesn't want to hear something more negative than that go ahead and just clock out.
Yeah, because I can't promise that it's going to be terribly constructive going forward.
All right. Go ahead, Dave. We gave him enough time to get out of here.
I absolutely despise this record. It mentally and physically pained me to listen to it. So like there you go. So that's the appetizer for what's coming.
That's the review.
Yeah. So if I'm being as like as polite as possible, I can just sum up everything with this was not made for me, which I do think is a little bit of a cop-out, which is why I'm not going to just stick with that. But I can say that, like, Jonah talked about this record's influence, which I will defer to the smarter people who know this record and this band more. I've heard the Clash's name thrown around by bands that I do like, so I know obviously that this band did something for somebody, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, if the dominoes have to fall, the first one has to get pushed to make it start. So like on that aspect, I understand why the Clash maybe have to exist, for the timeline of music to make sense. But I think this album is so over bloated and just devoid of, like, I don't know, cohesion. And I really do think, and I know that this is going to be like a super hot take for people who like this band, and they'll probably just think I'm some random loser on the internet, which is true. I think Joe Strummer, the lead singer, is the reason I do not like this record. I think his vocals are some of the worst vocals I think I've listened to in a very long time. Like we give Jason a lot of stuff for.
I bet Jason likes these vocals.
We give Jason a lot of stuff for not liking certain vocalists, like Bruce Dickinson, like a James LaBrie, like a Ronnie James Dio, you know, and those gentlemen that I named are all accomplished, you know, singers. Some of them professionally trained, professionally taught. This gentleman, Mr. Strummer here, is clearly not among those at all. And in fact, makes this album infinitely worse with every time I listen to this record has gotten worse. I don't connect with any of it. And yeah, 19 songs is absolutely way too many. I could go on and on, I won't, but this album sucked to me. I didn't like it at all.
It has no business being 19 tracks long.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I got the memo. Keep it short. This, unfortunately, while I am a fan of certain eras of music, as Jonah alluded to, another band from Britain, this was a complete miss. One, I'm not a big punk rock fan. Two, I'm not a slow punk rock fan. Three, I'm not a reggae fan. Not really a ska fan either. And it turns out they do all of that on this album. While there are a few good songs, marginally good, I think there's only one really good song on here, and it's about 18 songs of filler. I agree with Dave. Every time I hear the singing, if you want to call it that, all I in my mind, all I can see is like this guy just doing this jerking around and stuff like that, and it's just like it was very difficult to listen to this album. The fact that it's 19 tracks over an hour, or how
it's 61 minutes long.
Yeah, it's just kudos to them. I do have a theory on why this is an important album. We'll get to it when we get to the closing. But man, this is not my cup of tea.
I don't understand.
Yeah, 19 songs, way too long for this record. Look, ultimately, I think there were other albums on this list where I could say, like The Doors as an example, wasn't made for me, but I get it. Where I could understand in certain headspaces, in certain time frames, I could understand where that album would fit and be a good album.
Even Jimi Hendrix's album, which we didn't really love either. Like I get that record as well.
Yeah, I think I speak enough from a position of I've heard enough rock and metal music in my lifetime to be able to say that I just don't think there's ever a moment that this is a good album. For me, I don't like I like ska actually. I mean, there's a lot of ska I get down with, but it'd be better if it was just punk. Honestly, like if it was just punk and it was just the Ramones or something along those lines, where it was 2-minute songs in and out, quick little melody, and you're good. Great. This is trying to give a message.
And these songs aren't super short. Like a lot of these songs near the 4-minute mark, which
4 or 5 minutes,
which feels long when you're not enjoying yourself.
Yeah. So just overall, just a miss for me. I not jumping too far ahead here, but definitely not an album I would recommend anybody ever listen to ever again in history. Let's move on here. So we are going to still have some categories. MVP for the record. I'll go ahead and go. I have the Irish Horns. It's a group of horn players on the album. They stood out to me as being probably the best musicians to play on this record. So the Irish Horns for me.
I'm not even going to give mine because I have an idea that me and Jonah have the same pick. So, Jonah, why don't you just tell them who the real MVP was?
Yeah, I mean, the MVP for me and for Jason is going to be Paul Simonon. I just realized his name sounds like someone mispronouncing the word cinnamon or synonym. Anyway, Paul Simonon, however you say it, he was the MVP for me. For the songs that I really, really didn't like, his bass parts were the only part that was kind of a saving grace for me. Like I said, that classic 1970s P-bass sound. It's punchy. He's throwing in some really good licks in there throughout the album. That was the standout for me as far as musical performances. My MVP easily.
Jason?
Yeah,
That's
go ahead.
I'm the same.
Yeah.
All right. Dave, go ahead.
Look, I respect you, Josh. I mean, I come from Irish descent. But I hate the horns on this record, and every time they came on, I wanted to skip the song, which is like every song, basically. I refuse to play the game on this album. I'm not going to pick a most valuable player. I'm picking a least valuable player, and that is Joe Strummer. I assume that's the picture of him on the album cover. I wish he would have done.
Not.
Who is
No,
that?
that's the bass player.
That's Paul Simon on.
Yeah, I wish he would have done that before recording the album so that they wouldn't have been able to record this record. I joke. I would go with Topper head on. I think the drums are fine. That's about it.
All right, let's get on to the album title, album art. Dave, what do you got?
The album title, I don't hate it. I'm gonna go 6 on it because the title track is the best song and it's not even close. And I do like the album cover. I think it's very punk. It's not representative of the album, so in that sense, it's kind of false advertising. But I won't dock it for that. I went with a solid 8. I think the album cover is way more iconic than the album within.
Yeah.
I'll jump in right quick because Dave, you are a genius. I gave the title 6 out of 10 because London Calling, while not the best track, is a good track. And it's, they're from, the London area, etc. And the cover art, 8 out of 10. I thought very punk, an iconic moment caught on still, solid.
Yeah, I'll come in next. Album title, you guys are doing well here. I also have a 6 for that. It's a good title. I don't hate it. Don't love it, but it's a good title. Album cover, so that is Paul Simonon, I don't know. That's Paul. And Paul is breaking his bass out of frustration due to the bouncers in the crowd in that night because they were making all the people stay in their seats instead of letting them get up. I don't know how much there was making of people stay in their seats if they were playing this album live. They were probably happy to stay in their seats, but he was frustrated nonetheless. And they caught a good still photo of that, of the bass guitar that he broke there, which is actually in the British Music Hall of Fame right now. That being said, album art, sick. I love it. That's a 10.
Yeah, it's really good. I just I refuse to give it because the album sucks.
For all the same reasons, and because I had a slightly higher overall vibe with the album, I think the title's an 8. They're from the London area, and they're speaking about things that are taking place in their hometown, in their home turf. So, I think the album title is appropriate. And then the art, yeah, Josh, you're absolutely right. This is punk as hell. It's a great photo. It's a 10.
Yep. All right, let's get in here to the top tracks. Jonah, why don't you take us with your top tracks?
So I had kind of a... I did have some honorable mentions because, like I said, I did actually enjoy the new wave elements because I do like new wave, maybe more so into the 80s rather than 79. But kind of tied for third / my honorable mentions, I have 4 tracks. I have Clamp Down, Death or Glory, I'm Not Down, and Train in Vain. I think those songs are pretty good. None of them are great in my opinion, but I did enjoy them. And then my number 2 is going to be Lost in the Supermarket. I actually really like that song. I think that my 1 and 2 actually did end up going into my liked list. So Lost in the Supermarket, I think, is genuinely a good song. And then, yeah, number one for me is going to be London Calling. It's the song that I'm most familiar with, so there is some bias there, but I do think it is genuinely a good song, and it has a killer bass line.
Nice. I'll go second here. Believe it or not, I do not have an honorable mention. Nor do I have a number 3. I got this list down to 2.
Oof.
Yeah. And number 2 here, look, if you guys have been watching long enough, it's important for me to have an album end on a good song, and they did it. They at least did it there. Train in Vain.
Yeah, it's a good song.
Good song, not bad. Number 1 for me, though, and this is the only song on the album that I would say is good. It's okay. And that's Lost in the Supermarket. Yeah, just a cool little vibe to the song. Sounds cool. If they made an album of 10 tracks like that, we're having a different conversation, in my opinion. But
For sure.
that is what it is. So Lost in the Supermarket, number 1 for me.
I'll go next. I also don't have any honorable mentions, and I struggled to get to 3, but I did it. So I have Train in Vain as my number 3. That song got a 5 out of 10 for me, which is just as a recommend. Lost in the Supermarket is got a 5.1. I'm only saying these things. Normally I don't say scores, but just to illustrate where my frustrations are with this record. Lost in the Supermarket, 5.1. It's a fine song. It's fine. And then I have it at 6.5, London Calling, the opening track. I think that also hurts for me because I'm very big on listening to albums from start to finish. And the fact that like the first song felt like a vibe, like it felt like the type of vibe I wanted the whole album to have.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of punk anti-establishment type of vibe, and then the rest of the songs are like about Jimmy Jazz and Rudy Can't Fail and getting lost in a supermarket and clamping down. Like, dude, I'm just like,
I'll say this. I think it's pretty damning that London Calling is the opening track, and then the very next track is a cover.
Yeah.
And that song also got like a 4.9 for me. It was fine. Brand New Cadillac, whatever. Yeah. There you go.
Go ahead, Jess.
Only for the sake of argument am I going to give a top 3. I have no honorable mentions. So my number 3, and it's like way over here.
A distant third.
Yeah, I got Hateful. Number 2, Rudy Can't Fail.
Oh my god.
I know, but honestly, I feel like there's only one good track on this album, and it still didn't make my favorites list or my liked list, and that's Train in Vain.
Okay. I thought you were going to say something like The Right Profile or something just absolute awful.
Or Spanish Bombs.
Dude, that song is nearly offensive, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, by today's standards, it is offensive.
Yeah. So for the next category, this is normally where we would take the time to explain to you that the best metal albums in the world only have 8 songs on them. So we would try to cut this thing down to 8 songs, but that's a lot of cuts. I would just say if I could cut Rudy Can't Fail 11 times, I would cut it.
Yeah. I think personally, you could, if I was going to make a cut list, I would keep London Calling and I would keep Train in Vain, and then honestly, you could almost randomly cut the other song, the 11 songs from the middle, and I'd be like, okay, like the album would probably improve by 2 points just from mathematically.
Yeah. All right, we're coming into the last. Oh, good.
I was gonna say, of the last 13 tracks, only 2 of them I recommend.
Jesus. Just listen to the sentence. Of the last 13 tracks.
Yeah.
All right. We're coming into the last category here. This is where we like to give our score for the record. And just to give you a little bit of context out there, for a lot of folks, an average score is a 7. Well, for us, it's a 5. So if the album scores anything that's 4.9 and below, that's various levels of we would not recommend it. If it scores anything 5 and above, it's various levels of we would recommend it. Anything 9 to a 10, that's an all-time classic record. as usual here on the show, I will try to predict the order in which our scores go from low to high. I will go first.
Are you think you got a lower score than me?
I feel that I am certain. The fact that you gave a song a 6.5 tells me that you have this album's over me.
Okay.
So going into this, I had the Doors record as being the lowest scored album on this list as a 5. And I really thought that would probably end up being the lowest one. And I gave it a 5 at the time from what I outlined earlier of, hey, it's not for me, but I get it. This album is atrocious. It's unlistenable. Minus a couple of songs on here. I'm going to come in at a pretty low number. I'm coming in here at a 2.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, you did beat me, but I probably should go next.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I feel bad if this is somebody's first review on this channel. Somehow the algorithm led you here. First of all, I'm sorry.
Hey, look, first, thank you for sticking around.
Yeah, if you made it to this moment, thanks. Like, also give us a like and a subscribe. But
yeah, not likely.
but also, I will tell you, most of us like long albums. Like, we just this year reviewed Dream Theater's new record, and it's almost 80 minutes long. 8 songs, right?
And that got over 9 for me.
Yeah, and that album, a breeze compared to this. Like, easiest 78 minutes of my life. Okay? I say all that to say this. It took me multiple sittings every single time to listen to this record in full. Every time. I could not get it all down in one sitting. It was not possible. I'm at a 3.5 on this album. This is one of the worst albums I've listened to in quite some time. I feel like I'm generous with a 3.5. Like, I don't know that the record deserves that from me, quite frankly, but that's what the math shows that I'm at, so I will bend it to the math.
All right. Jason, I think you're next.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a theory on why this album is so important.
Drugs.
And maybe. I feel as though, and Josh, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but much like my generation was sick and tired of listening to 80s hair bands, we were begging for something new. And along came Metallica with the Black Album.
I think Metallica came out like, well,
when you look at this
that
album
specifically.
Yes, that album specifically. When you look at this album, it comes out at the very tail end of the 70s and right before the death of the crappiest music we could get, disco. I feel as though this was something completely different than what everybody was listening to.
I'd rather listen to the Bee Gees.
Dude, can we do a disco album? Can we do like Donna Summer?
No.
I'd enjoy myself more.
And I feel like, look, I just feel like this album in particular gets a lot of extra credit for nothing, except for being in the right place at the right time. I gave this, look, there are some songs that I was familiar with, but I was still not really big fans of those songs. I don't think this is the worst album I've ever heard or the worst album I've heard in a long time. Because I did have to sit through some of these other albums that we've reviewed. I gave this a 4.8.
I mean,
I would not recommend it.
You say that it's not the worst album you've heard this year.
No, I don't think it's the worst album I've heard this year, but it might be graded the worst album I've heard this year.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's only 2 albums that you've scored worse than this, so that's, and they're not by much. So this is definitely one of the worst albums you've scored this year.
Yeah, like I said, I do feel like I'm a little more forgiving because some of the songs are kind of catchy. Some of the songs are songs that I've heard in the past because of my age. But I was I was not a big fan of the songs in particular to begin with. So 4.8. I think I'm okay with that score.
All right, save us, Jonah. You're our only hope.
All right. So my score is above a 5, so it does get a recommend, but obviously with caveats. So we've all kind of touched on it already. This album is not for really any of us. It's definitely not for me either. And to Jason's point, I think anytime something comes out where it's like a counterculture thing, because, you know, at the time, I guess disco was probably like the most popular genre, probably. Like, I'm sure it was getting tons of radio play. All the clubs and stuff are playing disco music. So something like this coming out, and not only is it a counterculture movement, but it's also like, you know, just 19 tracks of, you know, of commentary, you know, like this. I'm sure it had an impact, and obviously some of the musical elements also had an impact and influence going forward. So I don't think that should be necessarily dismissed, despite the fact that musically, you know, the album has not aged well. I think that's putting it lightly. All that to say, while it does get a recommend, it is with a lot of caveats, because this is more of a historical album, probably, rather than maybe a good musical album. So I'll stop beating around the bush. I ended up landing at a 5.2, and it's funny because me and David talked before we started recording. David actually went through and scored all these songs individually, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I didn't, because not only was it a lot of work and I just didn't feel like doing that, but also like I didn't want to itemize everything. I wanted to kind of just feel out the album overall because it was so long. So yeah, that's what I ended up landing at, was a 5.2. It does get a recommend, but purely for historical purposes and for some of the influence that it carried forward.
Yeah. That leaves us with a 3.88. That's one of the lowest scores we've given in quite some time. Actually, it's tied with the album Pornography from Extreme. That got the exact same score.
Dude, I would much rather listen to that record.
You know, honestly, I'm thinking about it, and I'm just like, which one would I rather listen to right now?
Oh, Pornography all day long.
Dude, I would too. And Josh, you agree. You gave that album a 2.1. So...
There you go.
So that 3.88, I'll be generous, round it up to a 4 in terms of reading off what the score means. So for us, that's mediocre, just okay. Album scoring 4 are just barely acceptable. They have some redeeming qualities, like a few decent songs or moments, but these are often overshadowed by weaknesses such as poor production, lack of originality, or filler tracks. Not outright bad, but close. I would say as a whole that encapsulates how we feel, even though some of us feel a little bit stronger than others.
Just for the sake of thoroughness, go ahead and read a 3.
A 3 is subpar, poorly executed. A 3 indicates an album with more negatives than positives. There might be some attempt at creativity, but the execution fails, or the music may just be uninteresting. It's mostly disappointing, and while it may have 1 or 2 redeeming tracks, it's generally not recommended. That's more in line with what the three of us, the three of us scored, and not your 5.2 did some work.
Yes. I do feel like my reason, or at least my theory, as far as the counter disco, I do feel like that's plausible. But to what Jonah said, unlike my example with how the Black Album was kind of like a nail in the coffin, it aged great.
Oh yeah.
This did not age well at
Well,
all.
we all have some personal bias there on Metallica, so I mean, I don't think you can one for one just say Metallica aged gracefully. Like, we're biased, we grew up with it. Like,
true, but I think there's also something to be said about the genre that these guys occupy and like their production quality, because we can look at probably 10 other albums that came out this year, and we're probably going to rate any of those albums much, much higher than this one.
Jonah, not to put you on the spot, but without, because you kind of gave it I felt like you were giving it a bump based on historical significance.
A little bit, yes.
If you remove that, if you're just basing this purely on your enjoyment of the record, does that change your score?
I think it does.
So would that be a recommend for you?
Not the whole album, no. There are individual tracks and individual things that I would pull from this album, and we didn't cut for 8. But if we had cut for 8, I think that 8-track album would be a recommend. But
not as a whole album.
Not as a whole album. No.
Okay.
For my personal taste, this would get below a 5. I don't want to do the math and tell you exactly what the number would be.
Sure.
But
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it would not be a recommend for sure.
All right.
All right. Well, I would also not recommend that you watch this video either. But while you're here, go ahead and hit the like, hit the subscribe. We're putting out weekly metal content. We got metal reactions, metal reviews, metal time machines, metal brackets, and all kinds of other good stuff. And hey, in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Take it easy, everybody.
Later.
Peace.